Stay tuned to the end of the video for an important announcement regarding the future of paleoanalysis. 1993. If you were a fan of dinosaurs, it was a big year. The year that brought paleontology and our modern understanding of ancient life from the Mesozoic era into the public eye. People knew about dinosaurs before this, but the general public still viewed them as big, dumb, slow, lumbering lizards. You know, kind of like the amazing butt babies at the Crystal Palace in London. Which, not knocking that, because that is absolutely on my bucket list to go see. That's assuming they're not destroyed by any angry British people before I get to go. But by the 90s, there were some actual specific dinosaurs that people knew by name. Things like Triceratops, Stegosaurus, what we at the time called Brontosaurus, and of course T-Rex. And if you were a nerd, you might have known of a few others like Allosaurus and Ankylosaurus. But that was about as far as most people's knowledge went. But in that fateful year, a new dinosaur would skyrocket into popularity and become many people's favorite dinosaur. And it would do so by being the villain of a movie. A little movie that you may have heard of, which I know, it's trendy among paleontologists to pick this movie apart, especially because of this one in particular species. Because, yes, the Velociraptor depicted in Jurassic Park is way off from the real animal that we call Velociraptor. In truth, they actually changed the name of another raptor called Deinonychus into Velociraptor. And there's actually a few reasons why they did this. It's actually not even as simple as Velociraptor is just a scarier name. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. If you want to know more about that whole discussion, check out this video by Clint's Reptiles. He gets all into it. And maybe one day I will talk about my feelings about the Jurassic Park franchise as a whole. But what I wanted to point out was before Jurassic Park, most people didn't even know what a raptor was. And like most of the famous dinosaurs that we think of, or that I just listed a moment ago, they're not a single species. They're actually an entire family of dinosaurs, the dromaeosaurs. Most of these were fleet-footed, agile hunters that, as far as macro-predatory dinosaurs were concerned, were pretty small, most species measuring under 3 meters. But in 1993, a new species was described that would break the mold of what we thought we knew about dromaeosaurs. The largest member of this family that we know of, and one of my all-time favorite dinosaurs, Utahraptor. This is an animal that almost seems too good to be true in a lot of ways. It's like saying, what if a raptor was trying to be a giant apex predator like Allosaurus? And to really get my head around the idea of this amazing animal, I reached out to my friend Nathan over at the Cackling Crow Productions. And he made me this absolutely exquisite full-size replica of a Utahraptor skull. Because even though everyone's familiar with the claw, which, don't get me wrong, is undeniably impressive, this was the real business end of the animal. At 23 inches long, this is a full-size model. And if you were to run into me recently at a couple of different events that I've been to, you may have already seen this beast. But I want to tell you that you don't have to be a paleontologist or even a science communicator to own a piece like this for yourself. Now, I do own some fossils, but I am of the belief that I, as a person, have no business owning a real dinosaur skull. I have used casts and replicas for educational presentations long before I had this YouTube channel. But up until recently, I had a very difficult time getting a hold of large dinosaur casts. But then I met Nathan, and his work absolutely blew my mind. Now, buying a replica of a dinosaur skull is never going to be cheap, especially at full scale like this. But I will tell you, as someone who has been in the market for fossil casts for more than 20 years, I have never seen them go for as affordable as Nathan offers. This isn't even so much a sponsorship as it is me promoting a friend who I feel deserves the recognition for the work that he's doing. Everything he makes is 100% hand painted. He painted this. And if you want an amazing model like this, but you don't have the budget or the room for a full-size Utahraptor or Ankylosaur, because yeah, I got an Ankylosaur, then you can order any of the different pieces that he creates scaled to whatever size you want. If you want to check out the Cackling Crow and possibly order a handmade piece of prehistory, I will leave a link to his website and socials below. But now, it's time to check out one of my favorite dinosaurs. Now, I said before that this animal was first described in 1993, but it was actually discovered technically way before that. The first remains were actually found way back in 1975 by Jim Jensen, near Moab, Utah. However, the remains were way too fragmentary to really make any concrete identifications from them. All that was really clear was that it was the remains of a large theropod, so this find would go largely ignored for about 16 years. That is, until October 1991. When a large claw was found by Carl Lamone. This, along with further remains found by Jim Kirkland the same year in the Cedar Mountain Formation, gave us more of an idea of what kind of animal they were looking at. Kirkland recognized the claw as a trademark of what was, at the time, a little-known group of small meat-eating dinosaurs, or at least little known to the public. In the world of paleontology, raptors had helped scientists learn that dinosaurs were active and, in many cases, fast-moving animals rather than the sluggish reptiles that we once thought they were. This revolution in our understanding about dinosaurs started in 1964 with John Ostrom's discovery of Deinonychus. Ostrom was the first to propose that some dinosaurs may have been endothermic or warm-blooded. So going back to 1991, Kirkland knew he had some kind of dromaeosaur, but there was one major inconsistency. The claw was massive, especially compared to every other raptor found at the time, and the other remains suggested a much more robust animal than any other like it. This was a huge raptor, and its discovery prompted a great deal more study in the already highly prolific fossil site of the Cedar Mountain Formation. And then, finally in 1993, Kirkland and his colleagues chose to name this beast Utahraptor ostromesi, the species name honoring John Ostrom for his contribution to our modern understanding of raptors and dinosaurs as a whole. However, it should be noted that it was very nearly named something else. For you see, in the early 90s, a certain film director had taken a big interest in raptors, and he was actually helping to fund the research that led to this discovery being published. So, as it turns out, Utahraptor ostromesi was almost named Utahraptor Spielbergi. Yes, really. And it is very possible that although the Velociraptors in Jurassic Park was primarily based on Deinonychus, the fact is that the Jurassic Park raptors are still somewhat larger than Deinonychus was in life. Not as drastic as to compare Velociraptor from the movies with Velociraptor, the real animal, but it was still bigger than Deinonychus. And with Steven Spielberg having this inside information about an as of that point unpublicized larger raptor, it is possible or even probable that this did draw some inspiration to the animals that we saw in the film. But even though we knew these remains were from a raptor that was larger than any known at the time, we still didn't know exactly how big, which could explain why the movie raptors are bigger than the real Deinonychus, way bigger than Velociraptor, but still considerably smaller than what ended up being the real Utahraptor. Nobody could have imagined the scope of this nightmare fuel of an animal. Not even a Hollywood director. It was a raptor for sure, but it was different from every other raptor. But why was it so big? Why did this family of small gracile predators become a giant in one instance? Well, to figure that out, we would have to look at the environment that Utahraptor lived in. And luckily, the Cedar Mountain Formation has not only yielded even more remains of Utahraptor since 1993, but the fossils of many other species that lived in Utah 139 million years ago. Dromaeosaurs generally are seen as small to medium-sized predators. Hunters of small prey if they were solitary, or if they were social, like they've been depicted in media, then they may have been able to take down larger animals. But we are still talking about a group of animals that didn't exceed 100 pounds in most cases. And that was okay. They were filling the niche of small, fleet-footed predator, which was a good spot to be in, because contrary to what many people think, not everything in the Mesozoic era was gigantic. There was plenty to eat in the featherweight class.
I see what you did there.
And quite frankly, there was way too much competition for the spot of apex predator. But every once in a while in nature, you see an exception to what many of an animal's close relatives are doing. And 139 million years ago in early Cretaceous Utah, that seems to be the case. The fossils of the Cedar Mountain Formation give us a pretty good picture of the area as well as many of the animals that lived at this place in time. Most of this area was covered in patchy conifer forests separated by semi-arid regions, with rivers and lakes dotting the landscape, and there were abundant dinosaurs throughout this region. One of the most common was the iguanodons, 2 different species, as well as a species of armored nodosaur called Gastonia, which may have been one of the most dangerous members of its family, with its sharp spikes that adorned its back and got substantially larger at the shoulders and again at the base of the tail. Along the sides of the animal, they were almost blade-like, making this one of the most well-defended herbivores in the region. There was a basal therizinosaur called Utahraptor, which stood about 2 meters tall, along with other smaller dinosaurs, 1 species of mammal, and several fish species in the lakes and rivers. But the largest animals to call this place home were the sauropods. Specifically, one of the last relatives of Brachiosaurus, the 15-meter, 10-ton Cedarosaurus. So we have a pretty good idea of what the world was like in Utah 139 million years ago. But you may have noticed that there was something missing from this roster. None of the famous large predatory theropods were present here. Tyrannosaurs were still on the rise, but they weren't the masters of the northern hemisphere just yet. No allosaurids, no Carcharodontosaurids, no abelisaurids, no megalosaurids, and the closest spinosaurid lived clear on the other side of the planet. This lack of a top predator in an ecosystem teeming with potential prey was just the opportunity a dromaeosaur needed to try its hand at being the top predator. But in order to do that, it would have to drastically reinvent what it means to be a raptor. Utahraptor is the largest species of dromaeosaur that we know of, but there were other members of this family that did get big. 2 later raptors called Echilibator and Dakotaraptor. Both got between 5 and 6 meters long, or around 15 to 18 feet, and also about 2 meters in height. But the thing is, both of these animals appear to have been built like large dromaeosaurs. They were thin and gracile, built for speed. But Utahraptor was built different. It was heavier and stockier than the other members of its family. While most of the other raptors were built like cheetahs, Utahraptor was more of a tiger. Echilibator got close to this more robust shape, but it wasn't on the same level as Utahraptor. And really, we're still doing a lot of guesswork when it comes to Dakotaraptor, since there's only really been some teeth and some very fragmentary remains like some limb bones and a few vertebrae ever found. So, enough to tell that there was a large raptor, but not much else. Before the discovery of these other 2 large raptors, it was thought that Utahraptor was this larger size because it was an older species, a more primitive basal animal, and that the raptors were getting smaller as time went on, and they actually descended from larger-bodied theropods. But the truth is, all 3 of these raptors probably evolved this larger body size independently. Now, in the case of both Dakotaraptor and Echilibator, they got big, but both were not the top theropod in their environment. Both had to compete with tyrannosaurs. In fact, Dakotaraptor, which lived in the late Cretaceous Hell Creek, had to contend with the mightiest tyrannosaur, T-Rex. So they were always playing second fiddle to something, but not Utahraptor. As far as we could tell, in early Cretaceous Utah, this animal was king. And with this more heavily built frame weighing about half a ton, it is believed that this animal used a very different hunting strategy to the other dromaeosaurs. Most raptors were pursuit predators, running their prey down and weakening it, so similarly to wolves. With their lighter bodies, they wouldn't expend as much energy running as their larger bodied prey. But with how big Utahraptor was, this strategy would not work. It is thought that instead, these animals were ambush hunters, more similarly to other large theropods or big cats today. And it's also hard to say for sure whether or not this animal hunted in packs. There is some evidence to suggest this, but it may actually just be circumstantial. In 2001, 10 years after the discovery of that first claw, Jim Kirkland and some grad students discovered a Utahraptor bone eroding out of the desert. Little did they know at the time, but this was literally the tip of the iceberg, or the tip of the sandstone block, because they ended up pulling out a 9-ton chunk of sediment that contained the bones of at least 7 individual Utahraptors, including 1 adult, 4 juveniles, and a hatchling. It appears that these animals died together, and I know that this seems like a smoking gun for proof of pack behavior, but I do want to present both sides of this debate. For you see, these 7 Utahraptors were not alone. They were found alongside at least 1 iguanodon. And sandstone like this is specifically formed from hardening mud. So what we think happened here is an iguanodon became trapped in the mud and either was already dead or close to death when it was discovered by these Utahraptors. And in this situation, predators did what predators do and took advantage of the easy meal. However, this easy meal turned out to be a death trap. The raptors went to feed on the iguanodon and inevitably got stuck themselves. So this was kind of a La Brea tar pit situation. But what we can't say for sure is whether or not these Utahraptors were traveling together as a pack when they found the iguanodon, or if the scent of a dead dinosaur or the calls of a dying dinosaur attracted several individual Utahraptors from all around. We see this type of behavior in animals like Komodo dragons, crocodiles, and heck, even scavenging birds like vultures, where they don't necessarily live in a family group, but they will gather together to feed. But regardless, this find tells a very interesting story about a very bad day for a number of animals in eastern Utah 139 million years ago. So Utahraptor became this large in response to an opening in its environment. As far as we know, for around 5 million years, it was unchallenged as the largest carnivore in the region, a position that no other dromaeosaur that we know of was able to claim throughout the entire Cretaceous period. Whether it actually hunted in packs or would occasionally just gather with others of its kind around kills is unknown, but regardless, they appear to have the run of the place. But I wouldn't say that they were exactly untouchable. As far as large predatory theropods go, they were still technically on the smaller side. If anything, this could be further evidence that these animals hunted in packs, making up for their comparatively smaller frame that would struggle to tackle larger prey alone. Regardless though, the sauropods were probably not on the menu unless one was found already dead. And Gastonia would have probably been a tall order in most cases as well. It would take a desperate Utahraptor to try to face down such a well-armored opponent. More than likely, their preferred large prey would have been those iguanodons, especially the smaller species Hippodraco, which was about the same size as an adult Utahraptor. There was also smaller prey available as well. Besides the small reptiles and mammals, we see the fossils of numerous different fish, turtles, and even freshwater hybodont sharks throughout this rock formation. This could, if nothing else, give us an answer to what younger Utahraptors were feeding on, if in fact they did not live in family groups. And we see a possible adaptation for an at least somewhat piscivorous lifestyle. You see, if you look at the bottom jaw of Utahraptor, you'll notice that the front of the jaw curves outward. This is definitely a curious feature that has not been fully studied in regards to what uses it could have had. But one theory suggests that a jaw arrangement like this which is unique among dromaeosaurs but present in other dinosaurs, may be an adaptation for catching and holding on to difficult-to-grip prey like fish. Now, this does not diminish Utahraptor as a terrestrial apex predator, but in my opinion, with the added context of its environment, this shows us that this animal was perfectly adapted to the world it called home. We're pretty sure that iguanodons were migratory animals, so it would make sense for them to be prepared to hunt other sorts of prey if their preferred food was not available. This strategy seems to have worked well from 139 to 134 million years ago, when Utahraptor seems to disappear from the fossil record. We don't know exactly why it disappeared, but if I were to venture a guess, I would say that it may have been the result of a constantly changing landscape. You see, throughout the Cretaceous period, the continents of the northern hemisphere were constantly being divided by inland seas like the Western Interior Seaway and the Bering Strait. This, along with the presence of mountain ranges, would isolate populations of dinosaurs for millions of years at a time. And it seems that one of these times of isolation is when Utahraptor rose to become the top predator. But because this was constantly in flux, eventually there was going to be an opening for competition to come through. With the evolving tyrannosaurs in the west, and the Carcharodontosaurs like Acrocanthosaurus to the south, it was only a matter of time before this giant dromaeosaur was outclassed. And like I said before, by comparison to a lot of these true giant predators, Utahraptor was still fairly small. Acrocanthosaurus weighed around 12 times as much as Utahraptor, so there would have been no contest if the two ever came face to face. Now, even though the oldest remains that we know of for Acrocanthosaurus are around 10 million years after the last Utahraptor, we know its ancestors were already larger, because these guys were bred sauropod killers from South America. But a lot of this is all speculative. The truth is, we don't know for sure why Utahraptor disappeared 134 million years ago, or even if this really was the end of their story at all. With how sparse the remains of Utahraptor are, it's not impossible to say that as the Tyrannosaurs took over, these larger-bodied raptors went back to filling a more mid-sized predator role that they had done in the past, meaning that Utahraptor could be a descendant of Utahraptor. We don't think that this is the case.
Hold on. Also, there's that whole thing about Utahraptor possibly not being an actual thing, which, yeah, maybe, we don't know. But also, there's definitely been enough fossil evidence found to where we know for sure that there had to have been a larger species of raptor in Hell Creek at the end of the Cretaceous. Maybe it wasn't Utahraptor, but there was definitely something there.
Thank you, Tim. I know that if one of us didn't say that, I would get at least 300 comments all telling me about that one simple fact. But honestly, that's something that I really love doing. I love speculating and trying to think of the possibilities of how things could have played out based on the evidence that we have at the time. Because that's what a lot of paleontology is. Piecing together the story of life from whatever clues the Earth has managed to preserve. Here's another example. We don't actually have any direct evidence that Utahraptor had feathers, but we do have concrete evidence that other dromaeosaurs both before and after Utahraptor definitely did. And we have zero evidence proving that any species of this family definitely did not have feathers, like we see in the skin imprints of dinosaurs like hadrosaurs. So, until evidence comes to prove otherwise, it makes sense to assume that all raptors, even the big ones, did have feathers.
Personally, I don't understand people saying that feathers make them less scary anyway. I feel like anyone who thinks that needs to have a staring contest with a harpy eagle.
I feel like the public just got super used to the depiction of raptors as scaly because, like I said at the start of the video, most people didn't even know what a raptor was until Jurassic Park.
It doesn't matter, man. Birds are scary. Harpies have to be the scariest bird that ever existed.
No, not really. And actually, that reminds me about a video that I've been meaning to make for like over a year. In fact, there's a lot of videos that I've been meaning to make for a long time. And yes, I know, the next History of the Earth is due out. But if you have been following me on Twitter or Instagram, or even occasionally seeing my community tab posts here, you know that things have not been great in 2024. And looking back, most of 2023 sucked too. I'm not going to get into the details because it's involving my personal life. But I've already said what I needed to say. I have for a long time been trying to force myself to do things that everyone has been demanding of me, and reluctant to do what ideas I get passionate about. And I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna do that anymore. I'm not in a place right now where I will be able to make content consistently if I'm forcing myself to do things when I'm not feeling it. I will still be doing the History of the Earth series, but you have to understand those videos are by far the most work and research intensive. I do not have a team. I am still a single person doing this. The way I see it, I can continue to do things how I've been doing them, and maybe upload 10 times per year, or I can go back to making videos about whatever I feel passionate about in the moment, and you will all be getting a lot more content for it. So, to answer your question, when is the next History of the Earth coming out? When it's ready. So many of you have been hugely supportive of me through what has probably been the worst year of my life. And I shouldn't be saying that about the year that we hit 200,000 subscribers. I want to thank all 205,000 of you for sticking with me. And I want to tell you that better days are coming. I never thought I would have a channel grow to this size, and I hope that this is just the beginning for paleoanalysis. I want to thank Nathan from the Cackling Crow for providing me with this awesome reconstruction of a Utahraptor skull. Because of him, I now have a skull replica from one of my all-time favorite dinosaurs. And I had an excuse to tell you all why it is one of my favorite dinosaurs. If you would like to possibly order a piece from him, I will leave a link to his socials in the description. Alright, I want to thank you all again for sticking with me and for watching this video. Here's to a better 2025. Have a good one, everybody. Happy New Year.